I never imagined I'd be someone who writes to Reddit because they can't tell anyone in real life. But here I am, staring at my phone in the dark, hoping that strangers can help me untangle something so humiliating I can barely say it out loud. If this post comes across neurotic or rambling, I'm sorry. I'm trying to be honest, and for the first time in months, honest with myself, too. My name is Jessica. I'm 32, and I work as a project manager for a mid-sized construction and engineering firm in the Pacific Northwest. The kind of company that still feels small enough for office gossip to matter, but big enough for everything to go through email chains and enterprise resource planning software. I came here almost 3 years ago, after a rough divorce and a failed attempt at starting over in Los Angeles. I moved back north, looking for something stable and unremarkable. I guess that's the only thing I actually got. My family is small. There's me, my dad Richard, 59, and my older brother Mark, who's a teacher in Arizona and practically a stranger these days. My mom died when I was in college. Dad never remarried, and I always got the sense that none of us really processed it. We just existed quietly side by side and called that healing. Dad's past is a bit of a patchwork. He worked for the city for decades, then bounced around some lower-level consulting gigs as the industry changed. He has a weird chip on his shoulder about the new breed of professionals. He'll slyly compliment them while making these jokes about MBAs who couldn't find a torque wrench with Google. For most of my adult life, he was more of a distant shadow than a parent, calling with logistical updates, sending New York Times articles at 3 a.m., and dropping by when I least expected it. About 18 months ago, just as the world started pretending post-pandemic life was normal, Dad called me out of the blue, voice manic and louder than usual. He'd lost another consulting contract and was, for the first time I can remember, panicked. I could hear real fear: money, health insurance, social status. I did what any guilt-prone youngest kid would do. I offered to put his resume in at my company. I didn't think it would go anywhere. The firm was always slow to hire and wary about nepotism. But Dad knew a couple of the senior VPs from his public sector days. He name-dropped. The stars aligned. And after a string of confusing interviews, he ended up landing a role as a logistics analyst. Different department, but the same building as mine. I'd be a liar if I said I wasn't uneasy. But he played the part well. Polite, reserved, always a bit bewildered by the corporate jargon. Colleagues joked about Jessica's dad, but nothing unkind. At first, I made too much effort to pretend things were normal, inviting him for coffee in the break room, helping him set up his email, translating acronyms about new ERP modules. As the weeks passed, Dad integrated in his own way. He made a few friends, ate lunch with the maintenance guys or the grumpy old site engineers who liked to reminisce about the 80s. I even started to relax. Maybe he'd found something redeemable in late career. Then, all at once, subtle details began piling up. There were weird whispers at the Monday stand-ups. Colin from procurement joking about how Jessica must have veto power on these budgets now. It didn't sound malicious, but something about the way people glanced at me made my skin prickle. A few vendor invoices began showing up late or edited, but with my initials somehow attached, even though I knew I'd signed off days before. I started missing emails or finding them in my drafts folder, half composed about issues I didn't even know existed. At first, I chalked it up to stress or maybe absent-mindedness. I'd been working overtime on a big bridge retrofit project. If anyone was likely to screw up paperwork, it was me. But then it happened again and again. At lunch, Dad would occasionally slide in questions that felt more pointed than casual. They really run you hard, huh? All those late nights with project scheduling. You should make sure not to take the fall if something goes sideways. Or, are you getting all your emails? Some folks say the IT system's dropping stuff again. Once or twice, I'd find him in the project office, poking around. Just dropping off coffee, he'd claim, but he never brought coffee unless he was waiting for someone to notice. And just as quietly, my direct supervisor, Beth, pulled me into her office one day. Her voice was calm, but her words left my stomach twisted. There's some concern about deadlines and cross-communication on the Riverside proposal. It's probably nothing, but make sure you're double-checking document trails. Also, keep an eye on deliverables. People are looking pretty closely at your team right now. I wanted to ask her if Dad had said something, but I couldn't bring myself to say it out loud. I convinced myself I was overreacting, that he was just awkward, struggling to fit in, to find a reason to get up every morning. When you've spent your life excusing a parent's clumsy attempts at connection, you're trained to minimize this stuff, to rationalize it as best you can. That week, I started saving everything. A backup of every sent file, every meeting invite, every Slack DM. I started using my phone to snap photos of physical notes on my desk whenever I left the office, convinced someone was swapping them out. It sounds insane, but each small thing chipped away at the old sense of safety. The project office, once my domain, now felt full of invisible cracks. I kept all of this to myself, not telling anyone. Even Tasha, the only coworker I'd ever actually confided in, didn't know. She would sometimes pause in conversation and give me a funny look, like she could sense I was less grounded than usual. "You good, Jess? You seem on edge." I wanted to tell her everything, but I wasn't sure if it was just in my head. Paranoia or perception. I still hoped things would blow over. After all, who wants to admit their own father could possibly be the one sabotaging them? The thing about betrayal is that, at first, it never feels sharp. It creeps in alongside routine. A missed email, a skewed budget line, a joke you think you understand. I started spending more and more of my workday clutching at small certainties, double-checking my inbox, screenshotting expense approvals, Google Drive audit logs, all like talismans against the shadow that something was deeply wrong. Dad kept orbiting my space. Maybe an outsider would call it concern. He'd linger in the project bullpen after stand-ups, idly cleaning out old file cabinets, asking if I'd heard about layoffs in another department, casually mentioning mistakes he'd noticed in my materials. "You copied the wrong vendor code in that requisition. Careful, that's how people get written up." Sometimes he'd ask for my project login to help sort supplier stuff, a request I dodged over and over. "IT's getting tight on this. Better to clear through help desk or you'll trigger another security nag." He'd act wounded, as if I were freezing him out. "When did you start thinking everyone was out to get you, Jess?" I became stingy with trust. I moved sensitive project folders to my personal drive, sent key files to myself after hours, and added a two-factor authenticator to every app. I changed my physical office keycard code, too, after finding my whiteboard wiped clean, which had the next 3 weeks of critical path mapped out. Dad claimed he'd done it on accident while helping with the janitor staff. Nobody else ever touched my stuff. Meanwhile, the mood at work shifted. Tasha was the first to speak up. "You're on thin ice, you know?" I overheard some of the execs at lunch. "Someone's been leaking updates on Riverside delays, and somehow you're the one getting name-checked, even on changes you didn't make." It was a body blow. Tasha had always been straight with me, never sugarcoating the office politics. I told her what I knew, bits and pieces, nothing to paint a full picture. She pursed her lips. "I'm not saying it's him, but ever since your dad started, there's more gossip. People think you have some family in high places privilege. HR's sniffing around. Watch your back." Every time HR pinged me, "Quick chat," I felt my hands shake. They asked about missing signatures, chains of approval, flag time entries. "Is this really your sign-off, Jessica?" I always said yes, then spent the next hour triple-checking the logs. The part that hurt wasn't just the suspicion. It was realizing how easy it was for people to believe the worst. I'd worked late nights for years, played by every rule, and all it took was a few glitchy documents and a handful of rumors to land me under a microscope. One Friday, near sunset, I decided to confront Dad, softly but directly. We were in the parking lot. I thought of phrasing, looked for some kind, neutral introduction. "Hey Dad, have you noticed any weirdness in the office lately? Stuff going missing? People acting strange?" He looked at me, face neutral, a faint smile. "Jess, you can't let work get to you like that." He squeezed my shoulder, then took out his phone and started reading football scores. Conversation closed. I can't say why, but I felt sick. It was like he saw straight through me. That night, I went home and mapped out everything I could remember for the past 6 weeks. I started a spreadsheet, like I would for any job. Column A, date. Column B, incident. Column C, potential witnesses. Column D, possible digital evidence. There were more entries than I expected. My anxiety kept me up until 2 a.m. I toggled between berating myself. "You're imagining this. He's your dad, for God's sake." And making plans to lay a digital trap, embedding unique wordings in documents, tracking digital file access with discrete software, even naming a doc, vendor list V4. Do not use, and waiting to see if it would be touched. The next incident shook me up for days. On a Monday, my project team rushed to explain to a VP why a major purchase order had been sent to the wrong supplier. Someone flagged a revised vendor list as signed by Jessica, but the line items didn't match my numbers. When I checked the file's metadata, there it was, last modified and moved from Dad's desktop account at 10:21 p.m. Sunday evening. He shouldn't have had access, let alone a reason to be on our shared drive at that hour. I didn't accuse him. Not yet. Instead, I copied the file's properties to my private folder and pretended nothing happened. The next morning, I changed my passwords and enabled alerts on all shared folders. A week went by with silent, mounting dread. Then things broke fast. A confidential client proposal vanished from our shared drive and surfaced on a competitor's bid summary, flagged in an internal memo as likely leaked. Suddenly, nobody made eye contact with me in meetings. Beth, my boss, switched to clipped emails. Please provide a new risk matrix by noon. CNG CFO. Tasha started forwarding me rumor mill notes. My name, always tied to words like careless, overwhelmed. Late Wednesday, HR called me in. I sat, pulse pounding, as Serena, the HR director, closed the door. This is serious, Jessica. There's been an anonymous complaint about project mismanagement, missing files, even the possibility of deliberate sabotage. I need you to know, even if you're not at fault, upper management is treating this as a security issue. I must have looked destroyed because Serena's voice softened. I can't say more, but if there's anything off, the smallest thing, now's the time to flag it. I stared at the wall, the words ringing in my head. I pictured Dad's face, smiling, unbothered, scratching out notes on a legal pad in the break room. The next day, Tasha found me in the parking garage. She looked scared. I heard something. Your dad's been talking to upper management after hours. He's been saying you're not recovering from the divorce. You're overwhelmed. They think you've lost your edge. For a moment, it was like everything I'd worked for. The stability, the rebuilt sense of self after all the failed attempts at normal life, was nothing but sand. But after the fear faded, I felt something else. A cold, stubborn resolve. If my own father was crossing lines, I wasn't going to be gaslit or quietly pushed out of the job I'd rebuilt my world around. I was done tiptoeing. That night, I began assembling my evidence, preparing for whatever ugly confrontation was coming. No matter how much it hurt, it'd be why Thursday morning, I'd spent half the night drafting timelines and Dropbox links, barely pausing for coffee. Hypervigilance replaced sleep. Every minute my phone vibrated, I half expected to see, "Please return your keycard," or, worse, an email from legal. Each coffee in the break room felt like a scrimmage. Who would nod? Who would look away? Whose fingers were busy demang under the table? I burned with equal parts embarrassment and fury. 6 weeks ago, I would have joked that my worst enemy was the over-caffeinated payroll department. Now, every detail of my life, failures, projects, private history, felt like it was running on the office PA system. But I had something now, evidence, cold and neutral, outside of anyone's gut feeling. First, I finished my trap documents. The blandest, most plausible spreadsheet, 2023 vendor contacts, sensitive draft, designed with hidden autocorrect quirks and a unique typo, supplier, with two LS. I saved it in a protected directory, access permissions set to email me on any change. Within 48 hours, the file had been downloaded, edited, and moved at 7:18 p.m. Tuesday from Dad's account, confirmed by the IT access logs I'd quietly requested from my friend in tech support. The autocorrect slip had been fixed, but in the edited version, all my original intentionally incorrect numbers had been restored. Another tell. I recorded my screen, step by step, walking through the access history, the timestamps, the side-by-side comparison. I added this to a growing evidence folder with dozens of PDF'd email chains and Slack conversations. Friday morning, I met Tasha in a corner booth at the coffee shop across the street. The Palo Santo incense didn't mask my anxiety. Her face was pale with worry. "We need to get ahead of this," she said. "I've looked at your logs. This is bigger than gossip. You need to go to HR with everything now." I can't count how many times I almost backed out. What if I'd missed something? What if I'd misunderstood, exaggerated things in my mind? He was my dad. But every file, every after-hours login, every whispered, "She can't handle it," stacked up against the little girl in me saying, "He wouldn't do that, not really." I sent HR an email. Subject: formal complaint, project sabotage and unauthorized digital access. Attachment: evidence folder and timeline. Serena called me within the hour. "Can you come to HR right away?" And, "Jessica, thank you for being proactive." They were all there. Serena, Beth, my boss, the legal counsel, and 10 minutes later, Dad. He'd clearly not been told what the meeting was really about. He looked tired, rumpled, his careful working late, narrative faltering as he realized why I was there. Serena started gently, asking me to walk through my findings. I kept my voice steady, described the file logs, backup timelines, screenshots of lockdown directories with his access entries, the metadata on the leaked proposal matching his office computer's clock settings. After each point, I passed a printed page to Serena, then to legal, then to my dad. He barely looked at them. At first, he shook his head. "I don't understand what's happening. I was just helping, fixing some of her rushed documentation. She's been under so much stress. Sometimes she misremembers details, gets overwhelmed." That's when Serena asked if he had authorized access to my folders or any project documents outside his job description. He hedged. Legal jumped in. "Did you edit, download, or transfer company files after hours without Jessica's explicit sign-off?" He hesitated. "If you call trying to fix things for my daughter unauthorized, fine, sure. I did what I had to. The project was falling apart. She needed help." Beth was stone silent, arms crossed, eyes on her hands. A kind of embarrassed sympathy flickered in Serena's face, but legal was ice cold. "I'm afraid helping isn't a justification for violating both IT policy and client confidentiality. There is a clear pattern here, Mr. Moore, multiple accesses to Jess's accounts, evidence of document tampering, and at least 2 confirmed leaks to outside vendors." "But it's my daughter," he said, quietly, suddenly old. "Everything I did was to keep her out of trouble. She's been off kilter since since the divorce. Someone had to keep things from blowing up." Hearing him, I was hit by a paradoxical wave of both sorrow and anger. I saw the traces of real care laced through everything he'd done, warped into this mess. But intent doesn't fix damage. I didn't say anything. I just stared at my folder, willing myself not to cry or lash out. In the end, the company did what companies do. After a quick but thorough review, helped, no doubt, by the volume of neutral digital evidence and the critical moment for the project, they terminated Dad for gross misconduct, breach of internal policy, and violation of confidentiality. They quietly notified the clients involved, promising a security review. The official line: "All incidents are being reviewed to ensure client and employee trust." Beth called me into her office that afternoon. "Jess, you did the right thing. I know this doesn't feel like a win. Take the rest of the week, get some space. We'll get through this." Dad cleared his things after hours. I waited until he was gone, then sat in my car for nearly an hour, staring at the signature on the HR memo. I didn't text him. He didn't call. At work, the news was immediate. Everyone knew, and almost everyone had a theory. Some pitted me, but just as many whispered about family business gone wrong, or whether I'd gotten special treatment. A few old-timers acted cold, as if I were the traitor for exposing the mess rather than letting it fade away. Tasha stuck by me. Lunch every day that week, a buffer against the questions. At home, it was emptier than I'd expected. I tried to call my brother in Arizona. He didn't answer. Our last real conversation was months before, mostly about Dad's pride and how none of us had really handled Mom's death. Now, there was only a voicemail box on the other side. Sometimes it hurts more to win than to lose. I found myself Googling therapists, searching for something to help stitch myself back together. A week later, Dad emailed me a short, wooden note. "I'm sorry you got dragged into this, Jess. I really did want to help. Take care of yourself." I stared at the screen for a long time. No blame, no apology, just an admission that everything was now unfixable. Back at work, HR quietly wrapped up the review, and I was officially cleared, but the collective trust and easy camaraderie never quite came back. More than once, I caught myself holding back in meetings, speaking only when I had a spreadsheet to prove every word. I took longer lunch breaks. Tasha said, "You're not alone. People move on. but you don't have to forget. I started therapy. I began thinking not just about survival, but about what kind of person I wanted to be after all this. If there was any upside, it was seeing, painfully clearly, that boundaries matter, proof matters, and sometimes love and damage are inseparable. Truth is never as comfortable as the stories we tell ourselves. Final update. It's been almost 7 months since the day I sat across from my father in that sterile HR room, wishing that somehow I could just make the whole thing disappear. That wish never came true. Real life keeps moving. Even when everything you thought was stable becomes complicated rubble you have to live among. There are days now where I almost forget it happened, lost in deadlines and coffee stains and stupid meetings about milestone charts. Then, sometimes after a sleepless night, or when I type my father's name and see the autocomplete fill in more, Richard, system access infraction, the memory comes back. I don't know if trauma is ever over, but I know you learn to live with it, the way you learn to live with noise outside your window. You function, though you never quite sleep as deeply. My father is gone, from the company, and mostly from my life. For a few months, he sent me those short, formal emails, little updates about his garden, passive remarks about those corporate folks. I answered, when I could, with politeness. In December, after a long silence, he wrote one last message. I hope you're doing better. For what it's worth, I always wanted the best for you. I didn't answer. I still haven't found the right words, and maybe there aren't any. Sometimes I wish he'd say something cruel, just so I could be angry instead of tired. Work never fully returned to what it was. Most days, things are quiet. I handle my projects, document everything, trust no one with anything sensitive. HR made me attend a few leadership resilience workshops, corporate speak for don't break down on the open floor. Beth has gradually become more like a mentor than a manager. Her honesty helped save me, though I know she hates conflict as much as I do. There are still whispers sometimes, new hires and old hands asking, is it true your dad? I've gotten pretty good at the neutral shrug. Tasha is the bright spot I didn't expect out of all this. She became an actual friend, outside the building, even. Wilderness hikes, goofy dinners, talking about everything except work. She told me once, everything chips away at us. What matters is what you keep after the dust settles. I hold on to that. My brother called eventually. It was awkward. He apologized for not being more involved, admitted he'd always fought with Dad, and neither of us really knew how to talk about grief. He offered to visit, maybe in spring, maybe not. It's progress, even if our family is now permanently, obviously, broken. And me? I'm still in therapy. Some weeks I talk about boundary setting, some weeks I talk about trust, some weeks I don't want to talk at all. My therapist says my hypervigilance is normal. She says, your alarm system worked. Don't demonize your caution. I'm trying to believe her. Here's the part nobody prepares you for. Exposing the truth doesn't feel anything like victory. It's not even relief. When it's this close, when the damage is tied up in love, memory, loyalty, the truth feels like something flayed open. You lose the comfort of your illusions, yes, but you also lose the people you once constructed those illusions around. I don't regret coming forward. I couldn't survive in the limbo of paranoia and gaslighting. But if anyone reading is waiting for that catharsis moment, and then I was okay, and everyone clapped, and my father saw the error of his ways, that never came. I don't know that it ever does. Justice, if you want to call it that, cost me a familiar world and left me in another. Starker, sharper, a little less safe, but more honest. I still have the evidence folder on my home drive. I haven't had the courage to delete it yet, though I no longer open it. I keep records, keep boundaries, ask more questions, and trust that with time, some things will fade. Sometimes you write your damage in code and timelines and HR memos. Sometimes you learn to rewrite yourself, one cautious day at a time. That's where I am, and for now, it has to be enough. Thanks for listening, Reddit. If you're stuck somewhere between loyalty and survival, keep your records, keep your wits, and don't let shame make you small. Truth won't fix everything, but denial fixes nothing at all.